Hello. Today I'm talking to Tanya de Grunwald, who is an expert in all things employment related when it comes to these issues that we've been discussing over the last few years. Tanya, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. We thought we should have a conversation. So,
Yeah.
and we just thought we might as well record it and see how it goes. And if it's of any interest to people, then we'll put it out there. And if it's not, then we won't.
Yeah. Yours is an interesting viewpoint that you approach all this from. It's the world of hiring and I guess HR. Can you describe it to people? How do you see what you do and what you speak about?
Yeah, well, for the last 7 years or so, I've been running a club for big employers, particularly looking at how they hire young people. So my clients were the head of early careers, which is the person who looks after graduate schemes and apprenticeships at huge companies like Vodafone, Clifford Chance, NHS, or my only public sector member, but big firms, Santander, Google. And I was doing that from kind of 2018 to 2024. I just wrapped it up, Christmas just gone. And so during that time, you'll note those were the crucial years when DEI really hit the workplace, and with the corporate world particularly, which is where I was. So I was listening every month to conversations that employers were having about how to hire young people in the sort of shifting landscape. And so while they were looking really at things like university outreach and, assessment centers and that kind of stuff, DEI was really coming into it at that time. But it's a real kind of nuts and bolts kind of practical application of DEI. And so they were trying at the time to expand their talent pool, really. They wanted as many great applicants as possible. And this seemed like the way to do it. There was obviously, as we know, there was kind of a mood, there was a moment, which was not only national, but global. And so it just kind of seemed like the right thing to do. And I know that a lot of people think there's a big conspiracy and this stuff's being kind of brought in by Marxist nutcases. And there are some Marxist nutcases in there, but there aren't that many that I have met really on the front line of implementing some of this stuff. Has it gone off the rails? Yes, it has. Should it have been stopped earlier? Yes, it definitely should have done. But I don't see what people imagine to be happening like behind the scenes. I see people that were trying to get it right and messed it up. And then when they realized it was going wrong, there was no way to stop it. And obviously the trans stuff was part of that. And was probably the prickliest topic to approach. You basically couldn't. So we've now ended up with a complete mess. But I don't think it's because everybody working at these organizations is under some kind of spell and thinks there's no problem with any of this stuff and it's all going great.
Right. And when you say it, you're talking about DEI and kind of the application of DEI. Like perhaps certain DEI principles are good, but the application is not working out. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's right. I think they weren't clear enough about what they were trying to achieve in the first place. And it very quickly became taken over by people who they didn't recognize as activists, but they were activists, particularly heads of DEI who came in very, very quickly around 2020. And these people came in, they looked kind of like charismatic and modern at the time. I'm putting the 2020 lens on. You're going to have to forgive me. I know people want to yell at me, but that's how it seemed. So these very charismatic, interesting people who are bringing a different perspective that was not the usual sort of kind of corporate, rather sort of stuffy, possibly boys club kind of, boozing kind of culture was going out. So they represented something new and something fresh. Now, I think that people didn't realize at the time that lots of those people were a lot more politically motivated than was apparent at the time. And so what they brought in was something which nobody had voted for, which didn't align with the company's values, certainly doesn't align with good business practice. And then that they very quickly began to alienate more people than they were including, all while calling it all inclusion, which is one of those slippery words which has done an awful lot of damage, as has bring your whole self to work, which is a small phrase that has created a complete disaster area.
Yeah. I think anyone should bring their whole self anywhere.
No.
Their whole self is left in the bedroom, I think, where it can't cause any trouble and frighten the horses.
Yeah, I say bring your professional self to work. Nobody wants to see your whole.
Exactly.
Someone said that to me once, and I thought, you know what, that's true.
So, would you say that they accidentally introduced an activist class into a lot of businesses.
Yes. I think they didn't realize they were being lobbied when they were being lobbied. I know you want to talk particularly about the trans stuff, so I'll stick to that.
No,
I
no,
mean,
no. I'm interested in the whole thing, actually. Yeah.
okay. So, I mean, it felt, I mean, I was there on the sidelines of it. I mean, I've never worked in-house at any of these organizations, but I was working, so before running this club, I'm really just a journalist, but I'm interested in workplaces. I'm interested in young people particularly, actually. So before running this club, which, as I say, I started in 2018, I was doing a lot of activist work myself. I know activism's got a terrible name now, but I was doing lots of work for fair pay for interns. So, against unpaid internships. And I named and shamed Tony Blair, Simon Cowell, Philip Green, Vivienne Westwood, may she rest, we shouldn't pay her interns. And so I was doing lots of work around kind of saying, hang on, this isn't right. It's not fair. It's actually not legal in the UK if you're doing a job that looks something that looks like a job. It doesn't matter if it's called an internship, it should be paid. So I was doing a lot of work in that area from kind of 2012 to 2016, 17. And the big organizations kind of came around to my way of thinking in the end, which was just that this is not good for business, actually. Why would you put a hurdle like that in front of young people that means that they can't ever get paid work unless they can work unpaid first? Like, obviously, you're going to get rid of a whole load of talent that you're going to want, and you're going to end up with the people whose parents can afford to help them, which aren't necessarily the best people. So why would you do that?
Yeah.
So, and for corporations, that's not that much money. So I was really interested in that. And that piece ended up being part of what we now call social mobility, which we now recognize as part of DEI. It was called diversity and inclusion at the time. The E, which I know is problematic, came later. And it just felt like fresh and modern. That's all I can say about it, really. It felt like the right thing to do. I was part of that for a long time and I was on board with it. But when I began to not be on board with it, I suddenly realized that there wasn't enough space built into this thing for anybody to be able to object to it and for discussions to be had. Actually, I should say before that, I also worked in women's magazines. So I used to write for Grazia and Glamour and Cosmo and people. I'm not sure if you know that about me, actually.
No.
Anyway, I used to just write kind of funny stuff, all sorts of funny stuff for them. But I also am interested in young women particularly. So obviously, when I recognized this trans thing coming in, I thought it was strange when it came in, but I didn't realize what it was. And when I realized that employers had gone all in with one perspective on it, let's say, I thought, oh my God, I see what they've done here, but I can also see the role of young people, the role young people have played here. At the same time as I say that, I would say that, as much as activists have been responsible for bringing in a lot of these ideas, I see this whole thing as a leadership failure. I look at the leaders who let this happen is the question. It's so easy to blame the annoying person, the annoying DEI person or the annoying person that chucks you out of a pub for saying the wrong thing or whatever it is. But actually, the question really is, who gave them that responsibility? Why haven't they been trained properly? Who is actually responsible? Who is accountable?
Yeah. Well, that's like, I often tell people my story has two, villains in it. One is the trans activists, but they're just like, crazy people who are taking their resentments out on society. But the people, Jimmy Mulville of Hat Trick Productions, for instance, who didn't stand up for me when I was being harassed. I got to say that they're the real problem for me. If they had shown some leadership and some backbone, my life might have turned out very differently. And in fact, it's an interesting thing, but someone told me, and I wish I could remember if it was Lush or Pure, but it was one of these places with I think it might have been the Body Shop. But basically, there's a guy in charge of one of these places, and I heard that he's terrified of his staff. He's terrified of his staff because he knows they could turn on him and start objecting to something, about him, and he just tries to stay out of trouble.
I mean, we have to ask how we got here where, the boss is scared of their staff. This is not good. And there was a moment to catch it, but we missed it. And so now we've got to somehow fix it. And I'm actually, my next project is going to be starting a club, a new club, a sort of business network for employers where the tagline is free speech for employers. So it's going to be where they can talk about the stuff that, frankly, they should have talked about 5 years ago, and then we could have avoided this whole mess. But I mean, how powerful no debate was across society. It was really, it was quick within all these organizations as well. I saw it come in, and I think we're seeing the result of that now. That we're seeing the thing exploding at the same time as the discussions are very, very embryonic within the organizations. People sounding each other out as to where are you on this, where are you on this, is also very embryonic at the same time as the thing is blowing up. And that's why I think they were completely caught out by the Supreme Court ruling particularly, but even the Cass review before that, was because they actually haven't been able to sound out, actually, where is everybody on this? We're at very, very early stages. I think that's why you've seen things go wrong at Marks and Spencer's as well more recently. They've just all been sticking their heads in the sand, and now it's exploded, and now they've got to deal with it in real time while the Telegraph are on the phone, to the press office and work out what the hell they do about this. And it's kind of too late to have the discussions they should have had 5 years ago.
Yeah, and of course, because they haven't had the discussion, they'll find themselves on unsteady ground very quickly. Like, of course, the one of the things that we've always argued is the rules are, people say, oh, it's not a big deal to gender, or to say address someone the way they want to be addressed. But as we can see, it is a problem, and people often slip into it. I just published a piece by parents, one child left when they accidentally said his old name too many times. People have to rewire their brains, and the rewiring of the brains is supposed to work to such an extent that you can even have your period in front of a fully grown man, and you're not supposed to complain about it. Extraordinary situation employers have found themselves in. And you think because they don't have the language, and because, as you know, the language around trans issues especially is so complicated and confusing and so constantly shifting, they're going to continue to have trouble, aren't they, for a while? Then it's not going to calm down for them. They're never going to get someone like ourselves to sit them down and say, this is what you got to do. They're just going to be flailing, aren't they, for a good long while?
Well, this is why my idea is to bring them all together, and in an environment where they can say, oh, do we think we need to reassess this? Did we go all in with one perspective without considering others? Should we go back, and how can we correct this? They're never going to say, oh my God, we screwed this up. This is the biggest mistake we've ever made. What on earth have we been supporting in the workplace? They're never going to say that, right? That's not what they do. These corporations just very particularly, I mean, the corporate world is more my world. And, they very quietly do think, which I can see, if you're watching closely, you can see exactly what they're doing. And what they did in Pride this year, I thought was so them, which was to, rather than, there were hardly any progress flags anyway, the one with the, what do you call it? The chevron.
Yes.
There were hardly any progress flags. There were hardly any trans flags. It was all back to the Pride flag, the original Pride flag, just with the horizontal stripes, which of course is actually a much more attractive flag anyway. But I saw it. What's that?
It includes everyone.
Yeah.
You don't need you don't need different colors to include everybody, because then you have to put in, as they are at the moment, circles and umbrellas and whatever else they've got on the flag at the moment. Yeah.
But it was so them. I just thought, oh my God, that's so them. That's exactly what they do. And they just kind of quietly step away from it and just hope that nobody will notice that they were ever supporting some of this stuff, which they realize is pretty dubious. But, if you know what to look for, you can see the changes. And I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I know you're on X a lot, but I'm more of a LinkedIn girl, which is an interesting place to get a sense of what's going on out there, actually. And you can see the changes. Definitely.
People often say to me, is the tide turning? And I don't really have a good view of the tide, because I'm a comedy writer sitting on my own in my office. If I was to say that to you, what would you say? Is the tide turning?
Yes, definitely.
Wow. Okay.
The corporate world was always going to lead out of the mess being the let's just say the failure to consider all perspectives on this. Let's just put we have obviously views on how bad this stuff is and what it means for society, but the failure really was to go all in with one perspective without considering this objectively at all, and shutting down discussion. So I mean, so you can see that they're realizing that they've done that, and so that will be so the corporate world is I mean, the corporate world's quite interesting. I mean, I don't know people. I mean, it's a bit of a love-hate thing, isn't it? Because who likes the corporate world? But actually, I find them quite good to deal with because they're very transactional, and
Mm.
they're people that work in corporations. Typically, their sense of status doesn't come from like being kind or being nice. I mean, whatever.
Uh-huh.
There are some nice people that work in these places, but it really comes from success, and
Right.
success means landing a new client, or doing a really good job of that project, or getting a promotion, or whatever it is, or moving on to much better job than you were in before, being able to show your
Mm.
your old boss that you're doing better now, whatever.
Mm.
So I think the corporate world is interesting from that perspective because it's not, you're not dealing with the same emotional attachment that you see in charity sector, that you
Mm.
see in the universities. It's not that deep. It was never that deep. And I mean, I first saw it coming in, and I went to some of these sort of, they would have been branded LGBT inclusion events. I saw them really from like I would say 2017 onwards. It wasn't any earlier than that. But I hear
Mm.
it was knocking around in the BBC and in the NHS and places much earlier than that, obviously in universities. So it's sort of shallower. It's been around for less time in the corporate world. And you've also got a much better mix of people in the corporate world. You've got a
Mm.
much better class mix, frankly,
Mm.
because actually they were always better on that, because it has always been much more merit-based. So,
Yes. Yes.
just as long as you get in as an apprentice or a graduate or whatever, or, one of the EAs or the sales boys or whatever it is, they get in, they do well. If you work hard, you get on. So it's actually it's a much better mix of people socially, but also politically. So you'll find plenty of people who voted for Brexit, plenty of Trump fans and Musk fans, plenty of
That's
Farage
so
fans.
interesting. Yeah, that's
Mm.
so interesting that once you take away, once you make it merit based, you get a better class representation.
Mm.
Because of course, if you make it identity based, you'd only get middle class people.
Yeah, true. But it's also, it's more, I mean, they opened up to everybody because they didn't want to put barriers, because they genuinely wanted the best people. They want
Mm.
the smartest people who are going to make the most sales. They don't care what your accent is from that perspective. So they always
Hmm.
wanted, so they didn't want you to have done loads of unpaid internships first, or for your dad to know someone that works there. That's not really how they operate.
Mm.
So, and
Mm.
that I think has actually stood them in good stead. If you can immunize your industry or your sector to the sort of woke thing more broadly, that is how I would do it, is to make sure that you always had a better mix. So ironically, the organizations that have been better on what I would call DEI, which is a genuine mix of people, are actually going
Mhm.
to come out of this thing much better because they've got a better mix of people still there.
That's great.
You haven't got that same profit driver also in the public sector. So you
Yes.
start to lose your way quite quickly as to what we're actually doing here. For the private sector, DEI, I mean, the bad bits of it and the trans stuff as well, like, it's actually a detour away from what they would usually do, which is focus on the money. What were they ever doing? Doing anything which didn't make them money, wasn't popular with customers. Like, why were they doing that? So now they're like, what the hell are we doing with that? That was weird.
Yeah,
And then they
yeah,
just kind of try to be like, well, let's ditch that, because it's not so fashionable anymore. So in a
yeah,
way, is it worse that they were never that into it in the first place and they did it anyway because they just wanted to look good? Maybe.
yeah,
But it also makes them much easier to deal with now, because they're like, yeah, God, that was weird. Why did we do that? Anyway, let's ditch that and move on. What should we do next? So
yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
hoping is that as they get their act together, the public sector, and it will be just more normalized in other sectors to sort of see what the private sector is doing,
Mhm.
and which is just be a slow dropping of this. But I don't know if they can drop it completely. I mean, go woke, go broke is interesting to me because people use it to mean the fact that customers don't like this stuff. But I think the biggest, from the organization's perspective, the biggest mistake, the most damage that's been done is internally to their own organization from the inside. The great people they have lost through
Mm.
treating them so badly
Mhm.
has been a disaster. The way that they have given control to their younger people and lost
Mm.
control at the top has been
Mm.
a disaster. I mean, so the amount of legal risk everywhere, insurance risk everywhere.
Right.
Internally, your organization, if you're an organization that's gone all in with this stuff, you're in bad shape.
Wow, that's so interesting. Gosh. Yeah. Um, sorry, I've thrown myself just by so like one place you saw that play out very visibly, very publicly, was in the advertising. Jaguar and Budweiser, of course, being the best examples, But isn't that interesting that like Budweiser did this disastrous campaign, lost billions, and then Jaguar just walked into the same trap. Why is this like just residual feed? Oh, this is trendy and not really thinking about it too much. But you would expect wasn't it a new car they were rolling out with Jaguar, or was it just a rebrand? I don't know. But it was again just another disaster.
Yeah, I think
Why
it was their new electric vehicles, wasn't it? There was
Yeah,
a pink one and a blue one.
that's right.
I,
That's right.
yeah, I don't think you're their target market, Graham.
And no, I'm certainly not. But I don't think anyone was in
No,
there
exactly.
for the ads. No one liked the
Well,
ads.
yeah, I mean, that's interesting when you see them make a huge mistake like that. And I do think it was a huge mistake. And a few people at the time were going, well, let's see if it turns out to be genius. I'm like, I don't see how that's going to be genius. But, why would you alienate all your customers? That doesn't seem like a good plan. To replace them with the only people that like this stuff haven't got any money because they're not working, probably. I mean, I don't know. It's like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
This is not the people that have got loads of money. That the kids love this stuff. I think what happened there was that they had the CEO and the marketing guy were both all in with the politics of the stuff. I think they're both middle-aged gay men, of which there are an
Right.
awful lot of these guys around who are
Yes.
absolute, and they're huge personalities. I don't know these two guys particularly, but they chose a branding ad agency called Accenture Song, which is part of Accenture, who obviously came up with it. That should have presumably gone to the board. I don't know how those guys got that through. I suspect it's the sheer force of their personality. I know a lot of these people kind of by type, and there's a lot of them within banking, within law firms, within retail. So lots of them at Tesco, lots of them at Sky as well.
Tim Davies' right-hand man is one,
Okay.
I believe. Another true believer, gay guy who's a true believer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's Clifford Chance.
Yeah. Again, it just takes one person, doesn't it? It doesn't take many people to kind of not corrupt, what's the word, but to throw a company off the tracks.
Yeah, and I think, women deserve a lot of blame, I think, for being the enforcers of the be kind stuff. But I see an awful lot, especially since the Supreme Court ruling in the UK, I see an awful lot of this, the power behind it, the force behind it is now coming from middle-aged gay men.
Wow. Okay.
Definitely. And I'm told that's a controversial thing to say, but I just don't know why, because I see it literally every day. These are the guys that come for me as well. On LinkedIn. These are the only people who thought that Pride went well this year.
Yeah. It was an interesting month, wasn't it? Like normally what I find during Pride Month over the last 4 or 5 years is that it is the time when the insults to women just become almost unbearable, and it's like a month long what was that thing in 1984, Rage Day, about everything that's kind of seen as normal and everyone who's seen as not special. It's like a terrible time to be just a normal person.
Yeah. I don't know why you're saying it's not just a month though. It's still going on in London. I know you're in the US, but it's still going on, and it's like mid-August here. So that's actually 3 months, which I think makes it a season.
Yeah.
So, and I just think a lot of people don't mind a little, a weekend, even a week, fine.
Yeah.
But there's meant to be Disability Awareness Month in the UK. It's meant to be July. Hello. It's been and gone. No one saw it when, talk about blink and you miss it. It was nothing to see. There was never anything to see. No, and so it just sort of, I think a lot of people just feel like it's too much. It's too long. It's too much. It's too big. It's just too much.
Yeah.
And I think people have got a bit of an issue with that.
A funny story, Tanya. When I got banned from Twitter for the first time, one of the reasons given was that it was Trans Day of Remembrance or something. And it was like, well, when is it not a Trans Day of something? So, there's only a few days. Like anytime you say anything in June, it's like in this month of all months. So for the whole of June, you can't have a discussion about matters that interest you.
I think it's really hard to argue that it's not disproportionate. I mean, it just is. It's just a fact, and it's it's just become much too big. I mean, I think I know you were interested in something that I tweeted. Was it last week that I tweeted it?
It was last week, yes.
What was I talking about? Can you just
you were talking about you were talking about the discovery that the people who are taking on these pronouns and identities are often mediocrities in work, And then when they change their pronouns and they finally come out of the closet, they become huge pains in the arse. And I thought that was interesting because for me, like, you know, I would imagine that is actually beginning to annoy employers. And they're beginning, and so yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about it and just find out more about it, you know.
Yeah. I think
So
you paraphrased me slightly there. I think what I was
oh, yeah.
I
Sorry.
think somebody said, at what point you know, are employers going to say, you know, some of the some people call trans women, trans identified men, at what point are employers going to say, actually, this group of people are typically bring a lot of drama and a lot of problems, and we just don't need it, and just stop hiring them? And I said it's already happening, which I do think it is happening, based on what people are talking about and what they're seeing. So I guess, I mean, I think if we're going to do a snapshot in time right now, I think what we're seeing is that in the UK anyway, that the public mood and the law have both shifted, and massively. And
Yeah.
what you would call the trans rights advocates or activists, whatever you would call them, they have not recalibrated. And so now the messages and strategies that worked for them in 2018 don't work in 2025. So they're discovering that in real time. So the strategies don't work, but they also don't have any workable alternatives.
Yeah.
So, and this is happening at the same time as the employers have woken up to realizing this is not a straightforward civil rights movement. And, you know, because, you know, and like the rest of the population, you know, managers have just realized, hang on a second, what is this? What are we saying? Like, wait a second, what? I didn't think I signed up to this. And it's much more complicated. And also that there are some really dark corners in this movement as well. So I think people are seeing it with their own eyes. People are seeing it because they've got, you know, kids in school, and, you know, they're seeing it out and about. They're seeing it like in the wild. But also I think a lot of managers and employers are noticing it in the workplace. You can't not see it now. And it doesn't, there are bits of it that don't really work. Now, the problem they've got, of course, is that, well, it's not really a problem, but the difficulty they've got is that they've got to find a way to make this work legally in a way where you're not discriminating against anybody, but you're also keeping the peace. And you've got one group of people who've got very used to their demands being met and their voices being heard. And that's what needs to be reset. But there's still enough fear around some of the ambiguity of the legal situation that, you know, as I say, the conversations are very early stages still. The conversations, the problem is very developed and evolved, but the conversations are very embryonic. So that's their difficulty. And I think particularly for the trans women, the trans identified males, you know, they seem to have a disproportionate impact on the workplace from what I'm hearing. And they have they have more of an impact, I think, on the women in the workplace than the trans identified females, am I getting this right, have on the men in the workplace.
Absolutely.
It's asymmetrical. And so you're also, you know, getting some problems with some of these people based on, you know, there have been some cases of harassment where some of the more senior people who are trans identified have been moved out of organizations, or, you know, NDAs have been signed after harassment situations have happened, some of which have been going on for some time. You know, again, they're not going to do a press release about that when they get rid of somebody, are they? But everybody knows that's happening. It's happening more and more. You're seeing people suddenly disappearing, and, you know, there's not going to be as big, we'll never hear a big story about that, but they've gone, and everybody who's interacted with that person will know, because these are the sort of people who attract this kind of stuff, and people talk, right? So there's enough people saying, what happened to that guy? And did you hear what happened with so-and-so? Plus, you know, the world of, you know, banking and law firms and stuff, everybody talks. So we know that that's happening. I mean, the bit that's difficult, I think, also is, you know, if we're supposed to be allowing people to wear whatever you would say opposite sex clothes in the workplace, if that's allowed, then how is that managed in a way that not only keeps them on the right side of the law, but also allows them to hang on to their best people? So if you've got women, particularly, who are working with some of these people, and they feel they've got to admire this person's nail polish because they've just had their nails done, and say, oh, that's a nice new dress or whatever, when actually they're thinking, I don't believe in gender identity, and what I'm looking at is a cross-dresser here. Is that more than they should be expected to do in just doing their job and wanting to just go to work and do the job they wanted to do and earn some money. I mean, these are really, it's not for me to answer these questions. I'm good at asking the questions, but
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to work their way through that. And they haven't thought enough about retention. They haven't thought enough about the people that they've lost already. They've lost their critical thinkers. They've lost a lot of their middle-aged women. And the people they haven't lost, who are smart enough to know something's wrong here, they've kept, but those people have either shut up or disengaged, or they're working from home and they're caring a bit less about their job. They care less about the organization than they used to. They care less about their team than they used to. And they're just sort of like, do you know what? There's a problem with that project. It's probably going to fail, but I'm not going to stick my head above the parapet because I know that guy's an activist and he doesn't like me anyway. So I'll just keep it to myself. The project's going to go off the rails. There might well be a commercial impact from that. Why would you hire all these great people and then get them to shut up or leave? Like, it's a disaster. I mean, it's a bit silly. I think I used the word talent a few minutes ago, which is what the word that they use to talk about their people, right? Their staff. They talk about talent, and they mean great people, your best people, right? When we used to give them that respect, and we used to cherish them and say, these are your best performers, right? These are the critical thinkers. These are the people who are going to say, there's a problem with this. I think we should do it differently. Let's see if this is going to work. I'm not sure. Those are the people who wanted to tell you there was a problem with this trans thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are they now? And I think that's why we're seeing in the public sector, you're seeing cases like Sandy Peggy, because I think this stuff started earlier, and I think there just aren't any sensible people still there.
Wow. Yeah. There's what was I going to say? There was something just there that one of the things we've heard a lot from trans activists since the Supreme Court decision, not from trans activists, but from organizations that are very heavily slanted towards the trans side of things, is that this is so hard to implement. How, we're going to have lots of questions. It's all very confusing. And it always strikes me as disingenuous because, we've had 100 years of single-sex spaces for women in work and things like that. And it wasn't confusing anyone before then, How real do you think that argument is? Is that just a delaying tactic? Like, what, and maybe you're not familiar with the argument. I've seen it a lot. I'm just wondering.
No, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where from that argument?
It's difficult because they haven't even started having these conversations about whether trans is a belief system or not.
Right. Yes.
So they've got to have a conversation for a start with their own HR team, right?
Yes.
That's stage one. You've got to sit down, all of you, and say, right, what are we going to do about this? If there is somebody in that team who is personally invested in this, for example, has a trans-identified child who's quite senior, that's going to be a massive blocker. If there's some people who are politically extremely attached to this and are huge personalities, particularly, I'm afraid, middle-aged gay men,
right?
They are huge personalities. They are very unappealing to challenge. So what you're relying on is a handful possibly of sensible people. And I do think the private sector is in better shape, as I say. The handful of sensible people are going to have to quickly suss out who the other sensible people are, and they're going to have to get their act together and present the law and what needs to be done here. And then, and some way, they're going to have to squeeze the other people out of the conversation. They might have to go above them. This is really all about people, and it's who's in and who's out, and where are you on this and where are you on this.
Yeah,
I think we've seen a lot of women, actually, middle-aged women, the kind of be kind ladies who, there's a lot of them in HR. But I think a lot of them have realized they've gone very quiet since the Supreme Court ruling. And I think their broad position is now, okay, well, obviously, I still want to be, supportive and inclusive and trans people, but I think on balance, I think the Supreme Court ruling was probably the right call, because obviously women need single-sex spaces. Obviously, this doesn't quite work in practice. Let's try and be kind, but the law was right. So they've gone a bit quiet. And now what you're looking at is whether there's going to be, and each organization will be different. And I think some organizations will collapse under the weight of this because I don't think they can get it together. I think they're that far gone. I don't think Lush will survive, for example, unless they get a new chief exec. But you're relying on whoever is left there who can see this clearly and has the power and the responsibility to get it sorted properly. You're also relying on them having a decent law firm that's also not feeding them a whole load of nonsense, which a lot of them say they've been fed throughout this. So the law firms are not, are not blameless here. And what I see is the
No.
HR people blame the lawyers and the lawyers blame the HR people. And everyone thinks it's HR because they think the lawyers are cleverer. But actually the lawyers, I think, have been pretty stupid over some of this stuff from what I can gather. And also, I'm starting to think actually that some of the law firms wanted their clients to make mistakes on this because obviously they make money in fixing it and sorting it all out for them, don't they? I don't know.
Never thought of that. Yeah, of course.
That's my working theory at the moment.
There's a lot of activists within law. There's the whole Garden Court Chambers is insane, and I think the people coming after me on behalf of David Paisley are doing so partly because they're true believers. So yeah, I see that a lot in legal firms, and you would have expected them to be the last to fall because they knew the law as it was supposed to be.
Yeah, but again, they haven't kept up, and just all those activists haven't kept up. They haven't recalibrated. I mean, the big moment, even though it was in the States, Bud Light was, as I understand it, I talked to HR directors a lot. They say Bud Light was absolutely massive in the UK.
Right. Yes.
That had a really big impact. It's a very clear commercial impact. They say that the Cass review also had a big impact, and the Supreme Court ruling more recently. So the whole thing is just creating a kind of an ick factor around the whole thing, which is just like, why would we go into that? Like, wait a second, what, puberty blockers for kids? No, we've been, why are we championing unsafe drugs for children? Like, no, that doesn't feel right at all. Why are we working with people who are still championing this stuff? Who are these people? The Supreme Court ruling, you've got people who were coming in as trainers, like gender diversity trainers 6 months ago. And now you're seeing them saying, well, I don't care what the law says. I'm going to use women's changing rooms anyway. The little girls are going to have to get used to it. And you're going, what? No. Are we ever going to invite them back into this law firm or this bank? I bloody well hope not, Graham. I don't know what they were thinking of the first time, but it's just got enough. There's enough. If there are sensible people still there, they've now got the law is so clear that they can say, this is the wrong move. This is bad for the brands. This is bad for our people. The women are saying they don't want to share the lose anymore with all of these people. Like, no. So it's become a lot easier to make that case. And I have heard of that pushback actually being more successful now, because you can say, you don't even have to say what you think. If you're clever, sorry, I don't mean people aren't clever to do it another way, but these things are very difficult. But if you're clever, you can say, I'm concerned about this organization. You don't even reveal what you think of it yourself personally. You say, I'm concerned about this organization. This is an area of commercial risk, reputational risk, PR risk, legal risk, bad for our people, customers hate it, and we're in hot water if we've got this wrong. Do you want to be the person who says, no, I think it's fine, because it's on your shoulders? If it turns out that I'm right in flagging this and you were wrong in dismissing it, it's on you. Are you sure you want to do that?
And then NHS 5 is a great example of what happens when you don't have those conversations. I mean, you have people in court saying the most absurd things, like nurses saying they don't know what sex they are. Like, I would imagine other employers are watching this and going, I don't ever want to see one of my people stand up in court and say something as dumb as that.
There's also criminal liability on the senior person themselves if something nasty happens in your changing rooms and you're Virgin Active, for example, and you didn't sort it out. There's personal criminal liability, which a lot of people don't seem to realize. So that seems to be quite sobering as well. It's just easier to make that case, I think, than it was before. And especially if you've got a few, dare I say, allies, you also think this is, but you don't need to say what you think, and you're actually better not to say what you think. Some people believe in this stuff, some people don't. Some people see this as a civil rights movement, some people don't. Some people think it's a religion. Whatever it is, we need to be on the right side of the law. Should not be a controversial thing to say. And if it is, you're in the wrong organization and you probably need to get out of there. There's been some, do you want to hear about some of the trainers as well?
Yeah, go on.
So so there are some quite high profile people on LinkedIn who are now very outspoken on the fact that this is not going well for them in the UK. I see it in the States as well. And so they're very vocal about the fact they're very upset about the Supreme Court ruling. They're very vocal that they're still campaigning for what they would call trans kids, healthcare for trans kids, which my understanding is that means illegal and unsafe drugs for children.
Yeah.
So they're still going with that. And again, the failure to recalibrate is pretty obvious there. They are not getting the bookings they were getting before, because if they were, they would be posting about them, which is what they were doing 2 years ago. They're not posting any of that stuff. So I saw, I mean, Bloomberg hired somebody who they shouldn't have done, but these guys and the trainers are not doing well. That market has died overnight. There's a couple of people, one of which is Katie Neves, who you may know, formerly Martin Neves. I'm not dead naming. He's actually quite honest about that being his name.
Yeah.
Anyway, and Katie Neves has recently is one of the more well-known characters on this scene. And Katie had lower surgery in July, which is the final step of Katie's journey to womanhood. And these videos, there's like a recovery diary video series which has been done, and the videos have been posted under the Katie's business name, which is Cool to Be Trans.
Yes.
On YouTube, where I've seen them, but they're also on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So what you're doing there as a diversity trainer is you're posting your recovery video in all the gory detail of what I understand is quite a, invasive and unpleasant situation. And you're posting it for all of your previous clients to see, including, waving your dilator around and showing everybody the pillow that you use to get exactly the right angle when you do the dilation, and the mirror that you use so that you can see what's going on down there when you're doing it.
Wow.
And I was like, this is shocking enough for YouTube. If this is a person that does corporate diversity training, gender diversity training. You're putting that on LinkedIn, like all of your previous clients are going to see this. And this is what I mean about the failure to recalibrate, is that we are clearly going, and a lot of people, I mean, you and I know that these surgeries go on, but a lot of people just didn't really know that. And they thought people just sort of wave a magic wand and become a woman somehow, and they've never really thought about it. And suddenly they're like, what? This sounds like kind of a lot. And I didn't realize that's what it was. And so presumably now, I don't know what Katie's plans are, but if the plan is to go back to all the former clients, all the big corporations, and pitch diversity training sessions, the updated version of here's what happened, here's the story of my lower surgery, do you want me to come in and tell your staff about it? I think appetite for that is going to be quite low.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually impressed in a way, because I thought that I never expected Katie to get anything done. I thought he was too fond of his reason for getting into the whole thing. I find that very hard to grasp what's going on there. But I guess those people really are in the grip of something that's bigger than them, I guess. It's just a shame they feel they have to do it. It's I remember Debbie Hayton said that when he found out about that you could get the operation, he couldn't think about anything else until he had it done. And I thought that was very fascinating. I thought that was really interesting. But, it's a strange thing to try and base an entire culture around. It's like this thing that was supposed to be the very, very last ditch, tried everything else, nothing worked out, got the therapy, got everything. Finally, they resort to this. For that to be like first choice, for that to be the front of the argument, this is what we want to do, is insane. And it's astonishing that he thought anyone would want to share that journey that he's on.
But that shows the detachment from reality, I think.
Reality,
and the detachment from, I mean, in a way, I don't know if it's some of the drugs, the hormones and stuff that they take, or if it's just this is what being affirmed does to people. Is it just kind of, it's certainly, I mean, we know the echo chamber, whether you're trans identified or not, the echo chamber effect is very real. So if it's partly that, because they genuinely think still there's only a very tiny minority of people who have your hateful views, Graham, There are so few of them, we don't need to worry about them. I don't
Right.
share that view that there's a very small number of them. I don't tend to share my own views on these things, but I do not
Yeah.
I do not share the view that there's a small number of people that have your views, Graham.
Yeah.
But they are still pushing that line, but it's not working anymore because everybody has seen how public opinion has moved, and for an awful lot of different reasons, from different walks of life, from different experiences, from different workplaces, from different situations with people's schools and sports and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people, most people, I think, are reaching the same conclusion, which is that there's something very wrong here. And this thing that has been sold to them as a civil rights movement is in fact something much, much more complex and with some very dark corners.
Well, I think that's a good note to finish it. Thank you so much, Tanya. That was absolutely everything I wanted it to be.
Good.
Fascinating.
Good.
One of the things about me is that I because I was writing from home, because I was like only working with a collaborator and I was never in an office, I just didn't notice any of this stuff happening. And of course, if I'd been working from Hat Trick, I would have actually noticed the culture taking over the company, and it wouldn't have taken me so much by surprise when they canceled the musical, But
can I just say one thing? I was just going to do a little prediction. I thought you might also be interested in that. I think the activist scene is actually falling apart as well. I think there are fractures within it. For example, I don't know if you saw Keir Starmer hosted a Pride kind of celebration at Downing Street this year in June. It was like a reception thing.
I didn't see it, no.
And there were lots of trans. Well, it was mainly gay men who went to this thing. And so there were lots of people who put all the pictures and things on LinkedIn the next day saying, here's me, here's this lovely garden party. It was the old pride flag, not the progress flag and not the trans flag. And the pictures very much showed a story of gay men running this whole scene now. There was people from Stonewall Housing, all those usual sorts of people. But the comments below from other activists was, it looks to us like cis gay men are taking over this movement.
Right.
Because they were the ones giving the speeches. There was one trans woman making a speech, but it definitely seems to be that a lot of the trans-identified women definitely feel that the men have sort of taken over. So I think there's going to continue to be problems with that. So they're definitely not as unified as they once were. So watch this space.
I will. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Tanya. And let's do this again sometime.
Indeed. Thank you.